Welcome to Cardinal Perspectives, a series featuring in depth conversations with alumni, students, faculty, staff, and the extended family and community of the Catholic University of America. My name is Neil Donahue, the Senior Director of Advancement for Athletics at Catholic University. I'm pleased to introduce this episode of Cardinal Perspectives featuring Kory David, the Vincent and Ellen Sica Endowed Head Coach for Catholic Football. Kory David was officially named the head coach of the Catholic University football program in January of 2026, bringing more than 25 years of coaching experience at both the collegiate and professional levels, including more than 13 years as a coordinator. He arrived fresh off a historic run at Eastern University, where his defense led the MAC Freedom in scoring, rushing, passing, and total defense, powering the Eagles to their first ever MAC championship and automatic NCAA playoff bid, and the program's first postseason win. That 10-2 season earned Coach David and his staff the 2025 MAC Coaching Staff of the Year honor. Before Eastern, Coach David spent 6 standout seasons at Muhlenberg College, where his defenses helped the Mules win postseason games every single year, collecting 3 Centennial Conference titles, 3 bowl victories, 2 Elite Eight runs, and a trip to the Final Four in 2019. Earlier stops at Hobart, Delaware Valley, and King's College further built his reputation as a defensive mastermind, and he spent 3 seasons in the professional coaching ranks for the Philadelphia Eagles under coach Andy Reid. A proud alumnus of SUNY Cortland, where he was a 2-time All-East linebacker, Kory returned to coach there for 7 seasons, helping the Red Dragons capture 3 straight NJAC titles. Now he brings that championship pedigree and decades of defensive excellence to Catholic University. This conversation is facilitated by James Higgins, Assistant Director of Leadership Annual Giving for Athletics at the Catholic University of America. Let's dive into it.
Kory, thanks for joining us today. First and foremost, before we get into football, tell us a little bit more about yourself. How did you first fall in love with the game, and just anything else that we should know about you heading into your first year at Catholic?
No, James, thanks for having me today. Again, it's a pleasure, getting to sit talk with you a little bit about, the past few years for me here.
Yeah,
Um, again, for me, what I fell in love with the game. I've been this is going to be year 30 for me.
there we go. Congrats.
Since I was 10 years old, I've been playing this game and been coaching now for quite a long time. So again, it's been a huge part of my life, and it's something that, I've been fortunate to be around, not only I think playing, also in the coaching world,
Yeah.
a lot of really good coaches, not only from X and O standpoint, but good people,
Yeah.
Good people that have taught me, not only, from a games perspective, off the field, how to treat people and how to build football teams. So again, it's one of those ones where they've shown me, how to build disciplined football teams, how to build accountable football teams, and I think at the end of the day, that's something we can grow and build upon. You know, and again, I think, as I look at it, over the years, I've had the opportunity to coach, some really, really good young men,
Hmm.
that have brought, I think me, as a person and as a coach, a lot of, passion and,
Yeah.
excitement, to this game, so these experiences have helped shape who I am now.
Yeah.
And that's the exciting piece, for me, in this world.
That's great. Yeah. And obviously, you touched on a little bit. This is going to be your 30th year in football, but this is going to be your first year as a head coach, which is obviously a big step up and something that's well worthy and very well deserved. What kind of made this the right moment in your career to take the head coaching job here at Catholic University? And what made it the right time to take that step up from being a defensive coordinator, top assistant coach to being the top dog?
No, I mean, again, it's everybody's dream, I think, right, in the coaching world, is to become a head football coach.
Right.
I've been lucky, from a personal standpoint, I haven't had to go kind of chase every opportunity that's out there.
Yeah.
So I've always looked for the right job,
Mhm.
the right fit, the right institution that has a mission, has, great values.
Yeah.
So again, when I looked at Catholic, you know, that was a place that, hey, from a religious standpoint, from a faith standpoint,
Yeah.
from a football, and again, right, when you come to campus
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
meet the people, you're like, this is the place for me.
Hmm.
Um, so again, it wasn't just about becoming a head coach. It's about becoming, a head coach at the right place. And
Hmm.
I've said that in multiple interviews. it's the little things that I think matter.
Yeah.
Because again, I probably could have took some really really bad jobs, or might not be in coaching
Right.
anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you see it, you
Yeah.
see it happen, unfortunately. But again, you come to a place like Catholic, you got tremendous academics, a strong sense of community.
Hmm.
Again, our alumni relationships here are
Yeah.
strong. So again, what's a better outcome for our student athletes is to come a place like this, and hopefully I can help build relationships with these young men, with our alumni, and strengthen that bond, over the next, 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
Definitely. And getting into that, kind of what's your overall vision for the football program here at Catholic, both not only in year one, but also further down the line, 5,
Yeah.
10, 15 years? What's the overarching vision?
No, I mean, for me, I mean, year one, we want to establish the standard.
Yeah.
And again, at this point in the summer right now, right, it's working on PowerPoints and,
Hmm.
things for that. And, again, you look at the very second slide that I got, it's talking about the standard we want to develop in this football program. You know, and again, I'm a bigger standards
Yep.
than rules person, right? More often than not, when you have rules, people want to break them.
Yeah, sure,
You know,
exactly.
when you have a standard that people set, and again, we're going to build these and set really high standards for these young men, that will last for years to come.
Mhm.
It's not going to be just a 2026 football program. I'm thinking, the 27, 28, 29, 30 and beyond. How can this lay the groundwork for the future?
Right.
And as I look at it for a long term, right, I want to build a championship program.
Mhm.
The good thing for me in my career, you know, I don't want to jinx myself. I'm going to knock on wood here. At the college level, I've never had a losing season.
Mhm.
I've won conferences in the NJAC, the Centennial, the MAC, and I'm probably missing one other, the conference that I've been in. So again, I've been, I don't want to say the mountaintop yet because I haven't won that national championship. But I've been to the national semifinals and played North Central, and I've seen what they have as a program. And I look at why not Catholic,
Mhm.
why not us, and again, it takes the right, young men, it takes the right community,
Yeah.
to build that kind of program. And as I talk in every recruiting visit, it's, the nation's capital. Why can't we be one of the nation's teams?
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
and it's, and a lot of kids, maybe, parents, I think kind of get it, and care, kids, are kind of, well, why is it important for the nation's capital to have a big team?
Yeah.
Again, you look around, there is, I want to be that team that, in DC people talk about.
Absolutely. All roads lead to DC, whether it's the outside world or hopefully Division III football. So,
And the crazy thing I know, again, the biggest thing, it's not going to happen overnight. We're not at the Division I transfer portal where we can pull 30 transfers in. It's going to be, a day by day. It's going to take some work by the coaches, by the football program, by everybody involved here at Catholic. Again, from the administrative side, from admissions, financial aid, it's gonna involve everybody.
yeah, definitely. And a lot of what you've touched on in these first few answers is the right people, the standards, making sure that we do it for the right reasons. What kind of culture do you want to set here for the football program and make your stamp on the
For
program?
me, I mean, I'm looking to build a culture that's built around our core values.
Mhm.
So again, it sounds kind of bland and plain. It's team. And so again, it's a really easy 4-letter word. But again, when we break it down, you know, trust,
Yep.
enthusiasm, accountability, and mental toughness.
Mhm.
And again, mental toughness will lead to that physical toughness.
Mhm.
So again, they're not going to, they will be on the wall.
Yeah.
They will be on the wall in the new locker room.
Yeah,
But they're going to be words we live by. You know,
absolutely.
and again, to me, it's one of those ones where I think trust is going to be the most important. Do you trust the man beside you? Do you trust he's going to do the right things on and off the field? Will you trust your teammate, on a Saturday evening when maybe they're doing something that they shouldn't be doing,
Mhm.
and you pull them in? And again, it kind of goes trust and accountability there. And we're going to learn about that during this preseason. How to lean on each other. So again, we want players that are going to trust each other, bring ton of energy. You look at right now who our captains are. Evan, Blake, Noel, CJ. They have a ton of passion for the game. They're excited to come on the football field. They're excited to be a part of this program. And we need more, young men to, kind of really to not emulate them, but to have that kind of passion, that kind of energy, to not only be a football player, but I think to be a great student here. Because you look at all of them from an academic standpoint, they're great students
Yeah.
too, and they're good people.
Yeah, definitely. And I think something that you touched on in that answer too was doing it with the right people and having those standard accountability. What is the relationship building piece like in your program, whether it's for the culture, whether it's for the people that, are going to be around the program? What's that relationship building piece like that you've developed in your now 30 years as a coach that you'll really take forward here?
No, I mean it goes back to again my mentor.
Yeah.
Again it's building a relationship with everybody.
Hmm.
And again it's not only from our football players. Day in and day out, getting to know them. Having an open door, be able to sit and talk with any player that comes in. Because again as a defensive coordinator, right, I mostly spend time on a personal basis talking to my defensive players.
Right.
And again, when I was lucky enough to be at Muhlenberg for a very long time, I knew every guy,
Yeah.
and I was able to, crack a joke and, but I probably pushed the defensive players harder.
Hmm.
But again, I could, go and, talk some smack to the offense and,
Yeah.
but again, it's one of those ones where the defensive players, I was able to build a relationship where I knew what kind of day they had once they walked in the meeting room.
Hmm.
Didn't have to ask,
Yeah.
because again, you see the look on their face, you see the body posture. So again, that's going to be something that's going to be huge here to build those relationships, with those young men to where, again, we build that trust.
Yeah.
They're going to see me, I'm not a rah rah guy, but I'm going to bring energy every day.
Awesome.
And again, it's, I'm not going to be who I'm not. That's the biggest thing with, what I've learned over the years, as even though you may become a head coach, don't try to emulate somebody else. I'm not going to try to be the guys that I've worked for because they're different, and every head coach I've worked for is different. So again, those are exciting pieces for me, and again, it's building relationships with guys like you, in advancement, facilities, get to see those guys every day and walking around,
Yeah.
in the building and outside, our strength coach, again, and, up on campus, from faculty, staff, there's so many opportunities, as a head football coach that you got to step outside the office, where a defensive coordinator, I could sit in the office all day and watch
Yeah.
film.
Just worried about how to stop the run,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yep.
No, totally makes sense. Speaking of your time as a DC, you've spent over a decade as a defensive coordinator. How does that background shape the way you'll lead an entire program now, not just being in charge of one side of the ball? And how will you, implement that going forward?
No, I mean, again, it just all carry over, right? Again, people say, hey, you've been a defense coordinator for a long time, and you're going to favor one side of the ball or this or that. But again, what being a defensive coordinator taught me, again, right? It's that preparation, game preparation, preseason preparation, which we're in right now, in the off season for recruiting, So again, you got to be prepared, and now as the head coach, you're helping other, staff members prepare. Communication,
Hmm.
communication's key. It's vital. And again, in today's world, it's a lot of different ways to
Yeah,
communicate,
for sure.
from emails to text to phone calls. And again, and when the guys are here, building those relationships as well. And again, for me, a big thing, not only I'm going to expect for myself, but from our staff and our players is attention to detail. The attention to detail. So again, those are, just some big things that I'm able to carry over as a defensive coordinator now into that head coaching role. So again, it's, you know, X's and O's, from a defensive standpoint, I consider myself, a pretty good coordinator. I've been lucky enough to be a part of some really good defenses
Yeah.
over the years. But now it's the environment I've created. Again, one of my former players I was able to run into last week. Lives in the DMV, and and then again he's like you got to bring that environment we had,
Yeah.
on defense now as a team. And again, I was like, that's what we are.
Yeah.
That's what we're bringing here. So again, it's one of those ones where I think we built a little bit of it. In the spring, there's gonna be some toughness. There's gonna be some hard nosed physicality. We're gonna play fast. We're gonna play hard, but we're gonna do it the right way.
Hmm.
Those are gonna be the little things that we're gonna continue to build upon. In this program, is doing things the right way with class.
Absolutely, and I think that's a huge piece to the culture too. So definitely, great to nail that early. Another big part of running a program and being in charge of now the entire program is recruiting. And obviously, as a defensive coordinator, you did a lot of recruiting, but it's such a big part of building the entire program. What's your pitch to a recruit about why Catholic is the right place for them?
No, I mean I think the message is simple. Again, if you're looking for a place that's got a you know tremendous education, again, I think you look at you know Catholic University. It's one of those places where again you can come, and get one of the best educations in the country.
Yeah.
It gives you the opportunity, to come here and compete for championships. Again, you look at all the other programs here in our athletic department, they're competing for championships year in and year out.
Yeah.
And that's what I want from our football program. So again, that's something I've been pitching, to the 2027 class right now. The coaching staff, hired some really good guys that not only have winning traditions. I think everything I knew about them before coming into this. They're genuine people
Hmm.
that care about the program. Care about these young men that are in the program and that will be coming into the program this upcoming season.
Yeah. No, I think that's tremendous. Building off that a little bit, is there any big lesson that you've learned in the past from recruiting that you'll take into, now recruiting as the head man in charge?
Be fluid.
Hmm.
Be fluid.
Yeah,
Because again, every place is a little different.
sure.
Again, maybe it's from operation, timelines, whatever it is. Everybody's kind of got about the same standards and goals in that aspect. But again, every year is just a touch different. So again, we're going to continue to push. Hey, when you leave Catholic, you're going to be prepared.
Hmm.
Because of the classroom, because of the football field.
Yeah,
And again, we're going to have tough young men that have worked really hard. And again, at the end of the day, when they get to the next step, and again, it sounds crazy when you're talking recruiting with a kid that's a junior in high school right now,
right.
and you're talking about him about the professional world and internships, and he's going, I just want to graduate high school.
Yeah.
But again, that's that push. We're trying to get a young man to see, what a great opportunity,
Hmm.
to not only be a Catholic, but to be in Washington, D.C., the opportunities from internships to jobs, and who knows, from a social aspect, hopefully you're meeting your future, spouse, significant other here
Yeah.
as well.
It's pretty common here at Catholic U, so I'm sure there won't be
Yeah.
an issue with that. Getting into the good stuff now, the 2026 season. What do we're just over a month away from kickoff. What are you most excited about with this current roster, and where do you see the biggest opportunities for growth with the guys on the team?
No, I'm excited about, again, went through spring ball, went through winter lifts with these guys. I'm excited about the attitude, the willingness to push, and get better.
Yeah.
And again, right, it's, I don't want to, I haven't instituted that 1%, get better every day.
Yeah.
But again, that's something we talk about all the
Mhm.
time is, it's when we're doing something, you want to get better at it. Again, is it physics, is it business, is it,
Mhm.
whatever
Yeah.
it might be, is it bench press,
Yeah.
or when we get on the field and, this year, again, every day we got to push ourselves to get better. And I think they've embraced that change, the competition, that we're bringing, on a day in, day out basis, they've worked hard. So again, hopefully, we can start to feel that throughout the whole building,
Mhm.
and again, because I've talked about it with K-Rob, during the interview process. I want the football team to be the gold standard, and like any program, right? Right now we got a lot of improving we got to do, from depth standpoint. Again, once we get on the field, we probably installed maybe about 35-40% of the offense and defense in the spring, because again, we wanted to see what our strengths were,
Mhm.
what our weaknesses were, so again, hey, here's where we're really, really good, and let's build off that.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, this wasn't one of our strengths, but again, we can get better at it in the fall. Or hey, let's just take that page out.
Yeah. Definitely.
So again, those are the processes that we're working through, and we'll continue to work through, throughout preseason,
Mhm.
and that non-conference schedule. Again, at the end of the day, that gives us an extended month, to still, hey, because again, at the end of the day, winning the landmarks what it's all about.
Right. Exactly.
And I think, really the biggest, opportunity that's, coming is, just building consistency,
Yeah.
day in and day out, can, as a football program, can we be consistent?
Mhm.
And again, it's one of those ones where, you look at some of the best programs in the country. Yeah, they got really, really good football players, but they do the little things every day. And again, I think that's where we got to continue to get really good at.
Yeah.
Being prepared,
Mhm.
in the preparation, taking, as a young man, learning how to take care of yourselves, where, you know, again, when, you know, in the 90s, they didn't talk about sleep, they didn't
Yeah.
talk about hydration.
Yeah.
We had double days and, we were up late and, just got a little bit of sleep. And, you probably look back, when we're all getting together in the summertime, you're going, wondering why our bodies
Yeah.
hurt so much nowadays. But, so again, we're going to continue to help our young men grow in that aspect, you know. So again, it's not always just about the football field.
Mhm.
It's going to be all the little things that surround how to get better, how to get this program better.
Absolutely. And then speaking just generally to this season, what do you think is in store for this season? What's something for fans and community members alike to look forward to?
I think there's a lot. I mean, again, it's one of those ones where, I don't know where we'll get picked or, how the season will end.
Yeah.
But we're going to surprise some people. There's a great opportunity for us out there right now, in the conference, but also, playing some really, really good football teams, scrimmages, Johns Hopkins, playing Carnegie Mellon, Franklin and Marshall, McDaniel, and Salisbury. Again, three Centennial teams and then, one of the nation's top teams in Salisbury. It's going to be good tests.
Yep.
So again, we're going to understand once we get into conference play, what our strengths and weaknesses are. We'll build on those, continue to execute at a high level. Um, but again, it's one of those ones where I think the young men and coaches, again, I'm going to have to be probably the biggest one. I got to drown out the outside noise, because again, not everybody's going to be happy.
Yeah.
Again, not everybody's going to be happy. So at the end of the day, we got to talk about those standards we talked about on day one, and get back to them every day. So again, for football, as exciting as it is, it's a boring process.
Yeah.
It's a boring process. So again, improving every day, maximizing what we have on our team right now is all we can worry about.
Absolutely.
Again, you can talk about 27 recruiting class, 28 recruiting class, but they're not here now. So all we can take care of and look at is what we have here today and worry about that.
Yeah.
And that's the exciting piece. I think I got some young men that are really, really committed to the process. Again, continue to build chemistry, on and off the field. And again, it's really, really simple. You can talk X's and O's, but again, it's who gives that relentless effort, play in and play out, who runs to the ball, from an offensive perspective, again, right? Sometimes people just think it's throw and catch and, go, but do you have the O line that's running to the ball to make that extra block? Defensively, do we have guys that, are running to the ball? Can we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys on the tackle? And that's when you got a good team.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then another aspect, obviously, the fans, the Catholic community. How do you want them to feel about the football program by the end of your first season? Obviously, winning cures all ails, and
Yep.
that's probably the biggest thing. But aside from that, how do you want them to feel about the program with what you guys bring to the table this season?
No, I mean, after every game, I mean, parents, alums, fans, as they're looking at, Catholic football, I think that it's a really simple, thought that I have that our people are going to have of us. And they're going to say, man, that football plays, that football team plays the game the right way.
Yeah, relentless,
Yeah,
just like you
yeah,
talked about.
yeah.
Yeah,
So again, I want our young men, though, to be able to represent this program again with class, integrity,
Yep.
and, again, it's on and off the field.
Mhm.
And again, it's those decisions they're making, when nobody's watching.
right.
So again, whether winning, or facing adversity, our fans, should really step up, and be around, this team because I think this is that team that's going to be the breakthrough.
Yeah.
And again, it's one of those ones where, come cheer, support, be our number one fan. And again, I'm excited to meet everybody. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
So again, I can't wait to meet our. Met a lot of alums so far in my time here. And again, I can't wait to meet more.
Yeah.
Meet more and meet more. So again, come out, support. Again, you're gonna walk away, I think, with a really, really good feeling where this program's at right now.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of exciting stuff coming
Yeah.
up, obviously with the team on the field this year, the new locker room renovation project, a lot to be excited about for Cardinal football. One final question for you, Kory. If you had to sum up your coaching philosophy in a sentence or two, what would you tell people it is and how would you best describe it?
Again, right, you as a coach, you go through, from a young coach, it's this, it's that, and again, you probably have a paragraph for what your philosophy is. Again, right, in the years of coaching now, I've kind of pared it down, develop great people first,
Mhm.
great football players will follow. And again, I think if we can do that here, right, develop great people first, great football players will follow. So we'll build that culture, centered on relationships. Those relationships, will then bring accountability, discipline, that relentless effort on the field. Success will be attainable. And again, I think that's ultimately, and again, it's always sometimes it's hard to measure success. Again, right? Everybody says it's the championships, but again, to me, success, is championships, but also when your players 5, 10, 15 years down the road and call you, hey, coach, I'm getting married. I got engaged. I'm having a child. I got a new job.
Yeah.
for them to think of you in their special moments,
Hmm.
that's success to me. So again, it's great having the rings and the
Yeah.
banners. But again, one of the proudest moments, a few years back, I got to one of my players' weddings.
Yeah.
And again, I'm sitting there like almost with a tear in my eye.
Yeah.
And I was it's a special moment. You built that relationship with that young man, and you're like, I've done a good job.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's definitely a great way to cap it off and just a great memory to look back on your coaching career. But thank you guys for joining us, Coach David. Thank you for taking some time today. Just over a month away from kickoff, the Cards kick off the season at McDaniel Friday night, September 4th. Home opener September 12th against Carnegie Mellon. Please join us at Cardinal Stadium for a game this year, and we'll look forward to seeing the guys on the field soon.
All right, thanks, James. All right, and go Cards.